You know that moment when you're lying in bed next to someone and your skin literally crawls when they touch you? That's not how marriage is supposed to feel, right? But here I am, or was, I guess. I spent 4 years pretending, and when I finally told the truth, everyone acted like I was the bad guy. I mean, yeah, maybe I could have handled things differently, but honestly, I think I deserve some credit for trying as long as I did. I'm Nicole, 32, and I'm about to tell you how my marriage exploded in the most spectacular way possible. Not because I cheated, or because my husband Franklin turned out to be some secret monster. No, it fell apart because I finally said out loud what I'd been thinking since before we even got married. I was never attracted to him. Like, ever. But let me back up. 5 years ago, I was bartending at this brewery in Madison, Wisconsin, barely keeping it together as a single mom to my 2 year old son, Jaden. His dad? Total waste of space who ghosted the moment I told him I was pregnant. Real Prince Charming type, tattoos, motorcycle, the whole bad boy package. Meanwhile, I'm working doubles, living in a tiny apartment, and trying to figure out how to afford daycare. That's when Franklin started coming in. He wasn't my usual type at all. Kind of stocky, dressed like someone's dad in those awful white New Balance sneakers, and he had this dorky laugh that made him snort sometimes. But he was different. He'd come in after work, still in his construction manager clothes, and actually listen when I talked, not like the other guys who just stared at my chest or tried to get my number. The first time he met Jaden was actually an accident. My sitter canceled last minute, and my manager let me bring him to work as long as he stayed in the back office. Franklin came in during a slow afternoon, and Jaden wandered out right as I was serving him his usual beer. Instead of being weird about it, Franklin just lit up, started making these ridiculous faces that had Jaden giggling like crazy. By the end of his lunch break, they were drawing pictures together on napkins. Looking back, that's probably the moment I decided to give him a chance. Not because my heart was racing or I got butterflies, but because I watched this guy completely ignore his lunch to make my kid laugh. Do you know how rare that is? Most guys run for the hills the second they find out you have a kid. We started dating, and it was nice, safe. Franklin had a good job, his own house, and he treated Jaden like a prince. He'd come over after work with groceries, cook dinner, and never complained when Jaden wanted to watch Paw Patrol for the millionth time. My friends kept telling me how lucky I was, how I'd hit the jackpot, and rationally, I knew they were right. But there was always this voice in the back of my head, this little whisper that got louder every time he kissed me or tried to get intimate. I'd close my eyes and try to focus on how good he was with Jaden, how he'd help me pay off my credit cards, how he never made me feel bad about my past. I told myself physical attraction would grow over time, that being a good mom meant choosing stability over butterflies. 2 years into dating, Franklin proposed. He did it at home with Jaden helping him hold the ring. He'd even taught my son to say, "Mommy, say yes." It was perfect on paper. Instagram perfect. Facebook perfect. My friends were crying when I showed them the video. My mom practically threw herself a party, so happy her wild child had finally settled down with a good man. The wedding was small. We used most of our budget on a down payment for a bigger house instead. Smart, responsible choice, right? That was my thing now. Smart, responsible Nicole. No more bartender with daddy issues making bad decisions. I was a wife, a mother, part of a real family. Franklin adopted Jaden right after we got married. I cried during the ceremony, and everyone thought it was from joy. Really, I was crying because I felt trapped. Here was this man, this genuinely good man, giving my son his name, promising to love us forever, and all I could think about was how I had to fake enthusiasm every time we had sex. But I convinced myself it was fine. Lots of people marry for security, right? And Franklin was such a good dad. He never missed a bedtime story, taught Jaden how to ride a bike, came to every doctor's appointment. He even took off work when Jaden had the flu just so I wouldn't lose hours at the bar. How could I not love someone who loved my kid that much? So I played my part. The grateful wife, the reformed party girl who finally grew up and chose wisely. I smiled in photos, bragged about him on social media, told all the single moms at Jaden's school how lucky I was, and I thought I could keep doing it forever. I really did. I thought wanting to cringe every time he touched me was a fair trade for stability. Turns out secrets like that have a way of eating at you, and when they finally come out, they don't just break hearts, they destroy whole lives. But we'll get to that part. First, you need to understand how things started falling apart, one tiny crack at a time. I guess the changes started about 3 years into our marriage. Franklin got promoted to senior project manager, which meant more office time and less time on actual construction sites. At first, I was excited about the pay raise. We could finally start planning those family vacations he kept talking about. But with the promotion came all these client dinners and work stress. And Franklin, well, he started getting soft, like really soft. It started with his face getting rounder, then his shirts getting tighter. I tried dropping hints about joining a gym together, but he'd just laugh it off and say he was cultivating mass. That's when I noticed something that made my stomach turn. He was developing actual man breasts, not just a bigger chest, but like real man boobs that jiggled when he walked around shirtless. I started making excuses to be in bed early or wake up late just to avoid seeing him change. Meanwhile, my best friend Amber was going through this messy divorce and started hitting the dating scene hard. She'd show me pictures of the guys she was meeting on dating apps, and I'd feel this knot in my stomach. They all looked like the kind of guys I used to date before Franklin: fit, stylish, confident. Amber would talk about amazing first dates and passionate hookups, and I'd sit there remembering how I hadn't let Franklin touch me without the lights off in months. Don't get me wrong, he was still super dad, like annoyingly perfect with Jaden. They had this whole routine where they'd make pancakes every Saturday morning, and Franklin would let Jaden help, even though it meant cleaning up flour from literally everywhere. He never missed a t-ball game, knew all of Jaden's friends' names, even volunteered to be room parent at school. Sometimes I'd watch them together and feel this weird mix of gratitude and resentment. Grateful that my son had such an amazing father figure, but resentful that it made it impossible for me to express how unhappy I was becoming. I started spending more time at the gym, treating myself to new clothes, getting my nails done regularly, anything to feel desirable again. Franklin never complained about the expenses, just asked me to keep an eye on the budget. That drove me crazy too. Like he could spend hundreds on Lego sets for Jaden or new tools for his endless home improvement projects, but I had to watch the budget when it came to maintaining my appearance. The real wake-up call came during our summer block party. Franklin was manning the grill, wearing this tight polo shirt that showed every roll when one of our newer neighbors asked if he was expecting. He laughed it off, but I wanted to disappear. Later that night, he tried to initiate intimacy, and I actually gagged. I played it off as food poisoning, but really, I couldn't handle the way his body felt against mine anymore. Amber became my lifeline during this time. She'd listen to me vent over wine, tell me I deserved to feel attracted to my husband, that it wasn't shallow to want a physical connection. We started going out more. Girls' nights that would stretch later and later. Franklin never complained. He'd just text to make sure I got home safe and have ibuprofen ready on my nightstand the next morning. His endless understanding somehow made everything worse. I found myself creating this whole separate life. At home, I was Franklin's wife and Jaden's mom, going through the motions, playing happy family. But when I was out with Amber, I could be myself again. I'd dress up, flirt with bartenders, dance with strangers, then go home to my increasingly overweight husband and pretend everything was fine. The worst part? Franklin tried to make things better in all the wrong ways. He'd plan these date nights, trying to recreate our early dating days, but all I could focus on was how his wedding ring was starting to sink into his puffy finger, or how he had to undo his pants button after dinner. He'd buy me flowers, write me sweet notes, even started this thing where he'd give me foot rubs while we watched TV. But every touch just reminded me of how much I didn't want him touching me. I started picking fights over stupid things: the way he chewed, how he'd ramble about his work projects, his habit of wearing socks with sandals, anything to avoid the real issue. He'd apologize, try to do better, and somehow that made me even angrier. I wanted him to fight back, to give me a reason to be the bad guy. Instead, He just kept being Franklin. Steady, reliable, increasingly overweight Franklin. Looking back, I guess this was when I should have said something. Maybe if I'd been honest about my feelings, we could have addressed it. But how do you tell someone, I love you as a father to my child, but I'm repulsed by your body? How do you admit that you've been faking it since day one and it's only getting harder? So I kept quiet, kept pretending, kept going out with Amber, and watched as the distance between us grew along with his waistline. Then came Jaden's 7th birthday party. Franklin had spent weeks planning this elaborate pool party, complete with a water slide rental and custom Pokemon cake. He'd even taken a day off work to set everything up perfectly. I should have been grateful, right? Instead, all I could think about was how I'd have to watch him lumber around the pool all day in his swim trunks. The party was actually going great at first. Jaden was in heaven. All his friends were having a blast, and I was getting compliments from other moms about how amazing everything was. Then Franklin decided to join the kids in the pool. He'd been wearing this oversized t-shirt all day, which was fine. But when he took it off, I literally had to look away. His man boobs were bigger than mine at this point, and his stomach hung over his swim trunks in this way that made me want to cry. The worst part? He was completely oblivious. There he was, splashing around with the kids, helping them do cannonballs, being the perfect dad while I stood there dying of embarrassment. Some of the other moms were giving each other these looks, and I just knew they were wondering what I was doing with him. One of them, this fit mom who always wears Lululemon to school pickup, actually asked me if Franklin had let himself go recently. I wanted to melt into the ground. After the party, once Jaden was in bed, surrounded by his new toys, I started drinking, like really drinking. Franklin was in the kitchen cleaning up and humming to himself, all proud of how well the party went. Amber came over to help with cleanup, but really, we just sat on the back porch finishing off the party wine while Franklin did all the work. I don't know if it was the wine or just years of pent-up frustration, but I started venting to Amber, telling her everything, how I'd never been attracted to Franklin, how I only married him because he was good with Jaden, how I had to imagine other people just to get through sex. I was crying, but also kind of laughing, like when something's so messed up it becomes funny. What I didn't know was that Sarah, one of the school moms, had come back to get her kids' forgotten swim goggles. She was standing right around the corner of the house, hearing everything. And Sarah, being the gossipy person she is, just had to tell Franklin's sister, Jenny. A week later, we were at this family barbecue at Jenny's house. Franklin was inside helping with dishes when Jenny cornered me in the backyard. She started out all sweet, asking how things were going, then suddenly hit me with, "So, I heard some interesting things about how you really feel about my brother." I should have denied it, should have played it off as drunk talk. Instead, something in me just snapped. Maybe I was tired of pretending. Maybe I wanted someone else to know how hard it was for me. So I doubled down. "You know what? It's true," I told her. "I married Franklin because he was stable and good with Jaden. He's an amazing father, and I thought that would be enough. But do you know how hard it is to be intimate with someone you're not attracted to? To watch them get bigger and bigger and still have to pretend everything's fine?" Jenny's face went through like 5 different emotions before settling on pure rage. She started screaming about how I'd used her brother, how I was shallow and manipulative. Other family members started coming outside to see what the commotion was about, and there was Franklin, standing in the doorway holding a plate of leftover potato salad, having heard every word. The look on his face, I'll never forget it. It wasn't even anger, it was just hurt. Deep, pure hurt. He set the plate down carefully, like he was moving in slow motion, then walked to his car without saying a word. I tried to follow him, started explaining how he was taking it all wrong, how he should be flattered that I chose him for his character rather than looks, how being a good dad to Jaden was more important than physical attraction. He just got in his car and drove away, left me standing there in his sister's driveway while his whole family stared at me like I was a monster. Worst part? I still didn't think I'd done anything that wrong. I kept telling myself I was just being honest, that plenty of people marry for reasons other than attraction, that somehow him being a good dad meant I was justified in lying to him for our entire relationship. I didn't hear from Franklin for 3 days after the barbecue. He was still showing up to take Jaden to school and t-ball practice, but he'd wait in the car instead of coming to the door. I kept texting him about how we needed to talk, how he was being dramatic, but he'd only respond about Jaden related things, super formal, like I was just some co parent instead of his wife. Finally, on day 4, he came home after Jaden was asleep. I'd been practicing this whole speech about how marriage is complicated and how there are different kinds of love. I even looked up some articles about arranged marriages to prove that attraction isn't everything. But when he walked in, all calm and collected, wearing this new shirt I'd never seen before, my mind went blank. He sat at our kitchen table, the one he'd refinished himself last summer, and just looked at me. I started rambling, trying to explain myself. You have to understand, I said. I chose you. I picked you over better looking guys because you're such a good father. Isn't that worth something? Isn't that better than some shallow physical attraction? Franklin just sat there, this weird, sad smile on his face. Then he asked me something that knocked the wind out of me. Nicole, all those times we were intimate, were you thinking about other men? I tried to dodge the question, but he just kept looking at me with those patient eyes, the same look he'd give Jaden when he was waiting for him to admit to doing something wrong. And suddenly I was angry, like, who was he to make me feel guilty? I'd given him 4 years of my life, let him adopt my son, played the perfect wife. So what if I had to fantasize about other people to get through sex? You want the truth? I snapped. Fine, yes, sometimes I thought about other guys. Sometimes I thought about my exes. Sometimes I just closed my eyes and tried to get it over with as quick as possible. But I still chose you. I still came home to you every night. I still let you be Jaden's dad. Doesn't that count for anything? He didn't yell, didn't cry. He just nodded, like I'd finally confirmed something he'd suspected all along. You know what's funny? He said, his voice so quiet I had to lean in to hear him. I always wondered why you never looked at me during intimate moments, why you always wanted the light off. I told myself it was insecurity or maybe some trauma from your past. I never thought. He trailed off, and for the first time, I saw his hands shaking under the table. Did you ever plan to tell me? Or were you just going to keep pretending forever? I was trying to be a good wife, I practically shouted. Do you know how many women marry guys they're not attracted to? At least I picked someone kind. At least I picked someone who'd be good for my son. You didn't pick me, he said, standing up. You picked a lifestyle. You picked financial security. You picked a father for Jaden, but you never picked me. I tried arguing that he was twisting my words, that he should be grateful I was being honest now instead of cheating like other wives might do. I even threw in how he'd let himself go, how the weight gain and man boobs hadn't exactly helped our intimacy issues. But he just walked to the guest room, where he'd been sleeping since the barbecue, and came back with a folder. I need you to stay with Amber for a while, he said, sliding the folder across the table. My lawyer drew up some preliminary separation papers. We can figure out the details regarding Jaden's schedule later. Lawyer? I laughed, but it came out kind of hysterical. Are you serious? You're throwing away our marriage just because I admitted I'm not physically attracted to you? Most guys would kill to have a wife who chose them for their character. I'm throwing away a lie, he said, and his voice cracked a little. And Nicole, most guys would kill to have a wife who actually loved them. He turned to go upstairs, then stopped. You know what the saddest part is? I keep thinking about all those times you seemed so passionate, so into it, all those moments I thought we were connecting. Were you thinking about your ex the night we made love after I adopted Jaden? Were you imagining someone else on our honeymoon? I opened my mouth to lie, to say something that would hurt him less, but he held up his hand. Actually, don't answer that. I don't think I can handle any more honesty from you tonight. Then he went upstairs, leaving me alone with the separation papers and the sick feeling in my stomach. Not because I felt guilty. I still thought he was overreacting. But because for the first time, I realized my perfect plan might actually be falling apart. I ended up staying at Amber's place, convinced Franklin would come to his senses in a few days. I mean, who walks away from a marriage just because their wife isn't physically attracted to them? I kept telling myself he was being overdramatic, that he'd realize what he was losing. After all, I was the one who'd made him into dad material. I was the one who'd given him a family. But Franklin, he was playing a whole different game. While I was posting cryptic quotes about growth and speaking your truth on social media, he was quietly dismantling our life together. First, I got a notification that he'd removed me from our joint credit cards. Then I discovered he documented every major purchase I'd made in the last year. All the spa days, the shopping sprees, the girls' nights that somehow always ended up on our credit card. I tried logging into our shared banking app one morning and found myself locked out. When I called the bank, furious, they told me Franklin had already been there and separated our accounts. He even cataloged all my impulse purchases and transfers to my personal account. Who does that? The real shock came when I went home to get more clothes and found him sorting through papers in his home office. He'd lost weight, stress, probably, and was wearing a new shirt that actually fit him. There were organizing boxes everywhere, each labeled with things like financial records and house documents. "What are you doing?" I asked, trying to sound casual while internally freaking out at how methodical he was being. "Getting organized," he said, not even looking up. "By the way, I've documented every time you admitted to marrying me for stability or faking attraction, including your conversation with Jenny and the pool party incident. My lawyer suggested keeping records." I lost it. Started screaming about how he was being vindictive, how he was trying to financially abuse me by cutting off access to our shared money. Mistake. Turns out Franklin had been recording our conversations since the barbecue incident, legal in our state apparently, and my little outburst about financial abuse just more evidence for his lawyer. I tried a different approach, posting on social media about how sometimes men can't handle honest women and how financial abuse is still abuse. I thought my friends would rally around me. Instead, Franklin's sister posted the full story, complete with screenshots of my drunk texts to Amber about faking it in bed. My notifications blew up, but not in the way I wanted. Turns out, people aren't super sympathetic to someone who admits to using their spouse as a glorified ATM and father figure. Even Amber started getting weird about it. "Maybe you should have kept some things to yourself," she said one night after I showed her Franklin's latest email about dividing assets. "I mean, he did adopt Jaden. He's been paying most of your bills. And honestly, the financial abuse angle isn't really landing when everyone knows you spent $3,000 at Nordstrom last month." The worst part was how Franklin handled Jaden. He kept every commitment, never said a bad word about me, even agreed to let Jaden stay with me most nights since I was living with Amber nearby. But Jaden, he started asking to spend more time with Franklin, said he missed their weekend pancake routine and how Franklin would help with his homework. One morning he asked me why I made Daddy Frank sad. I had no idea what to tell him. I tried using Jaden as leverage, suggesting that maybe we could work things out for his sake. Franklin just looked at me with this mix of pity and disappointment. "You know what's interesting," he said. "You keep using Jaden as a reason we should stay together, but you never once mention love or missing me. Just like when we got married." Things really hit the fan when I tried to take Jaden to my parents' house for the weekend without telling Franklin. He documented every custody agreement we'd made since the separation, every text, every email. His lawyer sent me a warning so fast, it made my head spin. Apparently, when you marry someone specifically so they'll adopt your kid and be a good father, the courts take their parental rights pretty seriously. My own friends started distancing themselves. Those same people who used to like all my living my truth posts were now sharing vague statuses about character and karma. One of them even messaged me privately to say she couldn't believe I'd done that to someone as genuine as Franklin, as if I'd committed some horrible crime by being honest about my feelings. The divorce proceedings were a nightmare. Turns out, when you openly admit to marrying someone for their stability and ability to provide, judges don't look too kindly on your claims for spousal support. Franklin's lawyer painted a pretty clear picture. I had a job, no disabilities, and a documented history of excessive spending. The fact that I'd gotten used to a certain lifestyle didn't mean Franklin had to keep financing it. I had to move back in with my parents. How humiliating is that? At 32, my bartending income barely covered my car payment and the credit card bills I'd racked up during our separation. Meanwhile, Franklin sold our house for way more than we'd paid for it, thanks to all those home improvements he'd done. He got an apartment closer to Jaden's school, complete with a room just for our son. The real kick in the teeth? Franklin started getting hot. I guess stress and hitting the gym regularly will do that to you. All those things I used to hold against him, the man boobs, the belly, the dad clothes, just melted away. He started dressing better too, wearing clothes that actually fit instead of his old baggy stuff. One of the younger teachers at Jaden's school actually asked him out during a parent-teacher conference. I tried dating again, but it was a disaster. Madison isn't that big, and apparently my story had made the rounds. Guys who used to flirt with me at the bar suddenly had girlfriends or were focusing on themselves. Even dating apps were a bust. Turns out mutual friends would warn guys about me. Be careful. That's the one who used her husband for stability, then humiliated him about his weight. Great. Jaden started asking to spend more time at Franklin's place. He'd come home talking about their new traditions. Friday night, board games. Saturday morning, bike rides. Cooking lessons, where Franklin taught him easy recipes. When I picked him up one weekend, I noticed Franklin had lost even more weight and was wearing this blue button-down that actually made him look attractive. The irony wasn't lost on me. Then came the final blow. Franklin started dating this children's librarian named Rachel. She was everything I wasn't. Responsible with money, genuinely kind, and actually attracted to Franklin. Worse, Jaden adored her. He came home one weekend talking about how Miss Rachel helped him find books about science experiments and how she and Franklin helped him build a volcano for his school project. I tried to be the bigger person and friend requested her on Facebook. Big mistake. Her profile was full of pictures. Franklin and Jaden at the zoo, all three of them at some science museum, family game nights with Franklin's siblings. In every photo, Franklin looked happy, really happy. Not the kind of content, but settled happiness I used to see. He was smiling with his whole face, standing tall instead of trying to hide his body. There was even a beach photo where he was shirtless, showing off his new physique. Amber, who'd started feeling guilty about her role in everything, finally gave me some hard truth. He didn't just lose a meal ticket, she told me over cheap wine in my parents' basement. You lost a good man who actually loved you and a father who adored your son. And for what? Because he gained some weight? Because he wasn't your usual type? Look at him now. He's got the body you wanted, a woman who appreciates him. And your son can't stop talking about their weekends together. Maybe the problem was never Franklin's appearance. Maybe it was your inability to appreciate what was right in front of you. I wanted to argue, to defend myself. But what could I say? I was living in my childhood bedroom, working doubles to afford basic necessities, while Franklin was thriving. My son preferred spending time with his bonus mom, Rachel. My friends had either taken Franklin's side or drifted away. Even my own parents made comments about how I'd really messed up a good thing. The worst part? Sometimes, late at night, I catch myself looking at old photos from when we first got married, before I got so focused on his weight, before I let my shallow side take over. There's this one picture of Franklin teaching Jaden to ride a bike, both of them laughing. Franklin's arm steady on the back of the seat. He might have had a belly in that photo, might not have been the most attractive guy in the room, but the love in his eyes when he looked at our son, that was real. But hey, at least I was honest about my feelings, right? At least I spoke my truth or whatever, even if that truth cost me my marriage, my lifestyle, most of my friends, and the respect of pretty much everyone who knows the story. I guess karma has a way of making you realize that some truths are better left unspoken, especially when you're too shallow to appreciate what really matters. If this confession kept you hooked, make sure to subscribe, like, and share. We share powerful true stories every day that explore the complex realities of life.